Speaking of being below expectations, though, you want to talk about the biggest upset that we had in college football this past weekend. I know there was a lot of talk about Colorado taking on TCU, beating TCU, despite the fact that they were a 20.5 point underdog. It was a great win by Colorado. What if I told you that there was an even bigger upset in the college football weekend on Saturday? So I'm sure you guys have heard Texas State took on Baylor. And side note, Baylor actually did pay Texas State, I think it was $375,000 to go and have them play Baylor, basically paying for a win, right? However you feel about that, that's your prerogative, but that's essentially what it was. It's just you have a team that paid another team to get an easy win. That was the intent. Well, no one told this Texas State Bobcats team, and no one told this Texas State Bobcat team that they were going to close out as a 26.5 point underdog on the road, playing in Waco, Texas, and playing against a team that was pretty good this previous season. Baylor, good performance in 2022, went to a bowl game. We all know this, but not the same start that we had. And we gave a lot of attention to what we saw with Colorado churning over basically their entire roster. Texas State also did that to a little bit of a lesser degree as well. Texas State got themselves a brand new head coach. So while they didn't end up replacing their entire coaching staff, GJ Keene, he's a new head coach of Texas State. He did, however, he replaced the majority of this roster. He did end up bringing in upwards of 50. I think the exact number was 51 transfers from the transfer portal to revamp this Texas State roster. And there's some decently notable names on this list too. TJ Finley, for example, he was someone that spent his previous 2 years at Auburn. He is now here. He's the starting quarterback for this Texas State Bobcats team. We have another guy, Ismail Mahdi. He was a pretty good running back at Houston Christian, was a kind of a complete back. Didn't put eye-popping numbers, but did certainly do a little bit of everything for Houston Christian this past season. Another guy, Joey Hobart. He was the leading receiver for Texas State in the game against Baylor. Was a guy that started his college career at Washington State. So, there's guys that have Power 5 experience before transferring into Texas State, and it showed a little bit. Now, this was a high-scoring game. 42-31 was your final score. So Baylor, the thing about Baylor that concerns me was that Baylor didn't just lose this game. They actually struggled a little bit to stay in the game, period. Okay. So at one point, we're talking about Texas State being up as much by 15 points. No, 18 points. I did my math wrong. They were up by as much as 18 points in the fourth quarter. Joey Hobart's touchdown made it a 42-24 game. Baylor does end up later scoring, but after that last touchdown by Baylor, this was as close as they got. And it seems like TJ Finley, he found a home, threw for nearly 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's a career high for him at the FBS level. Joey Hobart also finding a home as well. He was somebody that he never had more than 100 yards in the game. His best FBS season, he had roughly 200 yards receiving at Washington State. That was in 2021. Went to Utah's Tech, had close to 1,300 yards receiving, and now is back at the FBS level at Texas State. And he balled out. The dude balled out. He's starting to really develop finally as a junior. He's a true junior because of the COVID year. Now, Baylor, on the other hand, I'm not worried about Baylor's offense necessarily, okay? So Baylor still put up 30-plus points in the game. So the concerns are not really about Baylor's offense. I'm more concerned, if anything, about Baylor's defense. The reason why I'm worried about Baylor's defense is we already know Baylor is going to have to play some better teams down the line. Let's forget about Big 12 conference play for a split second. Let's just take a look at the regular non-conference schedule. You know who's coming into town next weekend? The Utah Utes. And they just took down Utah. They won convincingly against Florida, 24-11, and they did it without their starting quarterback. So, a little bit of a wounded animal situation for Baylor. We'll see if they play with that desperation to put up a worthy fight against the Utah Utes. But some defensive concerns for sure against Baylor. If you're giving up 40 to a Texas State team that has all of these new pieces and maybe shouldn't have the most continuity necessarily in the very first game of the season. Hats off to Texas State. They absolutely deserve this victory. You put up that kind of offensive performance, and there was a lot of offense in this game. I mean, diving into the total numbers, Baylor had over 500 yards of total offense. Texas State, they had nearly 400 yards of total offense. So Baylor outgained Texas State. But Texas State definitely executed better on the offensive end. Shout out to G.J. Keen in his coaching debut with the Texas State Bobcats, getting his first win in the Keen era. So shout out to Texas State for that.